Trump runs from Epstein questions. Democrats and Republicans demand impeachment. Is the truth being hidden? Get ready to discover the scandal that could bring down this administration. Look at what happened yesterday. Donald Trump literally ran away from reporters when they asked about the Epstein files. And no, this isn't an exaggeration. The man turned his back and walked away while journalists shouted questions about the biggest sex trafficking scandal of recent decades. You need to understand the gravity of what we're seeing here. The Department of Justice just released the so-called Epstein files last night, meeting the deadline imposed by law. But here's the problem. They only released between 5 to 10% of the documents. And of those documents, 90% is completely redacted, pages upon pages completely black. There are even documents of 119 pages where literally everything was erased, every single page black page. Look, this isn't my opinion. The bipartisan congressman who wrote the Epstein Files Transparency Act, Democrat Ro Khanna and Republican Thomas Massie, are absolutely furious. Khanna said explicitly that the Department of Justice failed to comply with the law. And pay attention to what he said. They're exploring all options: impeachment of Department of Justice officials, contempt of Congress, criminal prosecution for obstruction of justice. Now, let me explain something crucial. The law that Trump signed exactly 30 days ago was extremely clear. The Department of Justice was supposed to release all unclassified records related to Epstein. The only permitted exceptions were to protect victims' identities. That's it. The law explicitly prohibits massive redactions like what we're seeing, and yet that's exactly what's happening. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche tried to justify it by saying they identified 1,200 victims and their relatives and needed to protect their identities. But here's the problem with that excuse. Why then are entire court documents completely redacted? Why did a federal judge order the release of specific grand jury transcripts, and yet they appeared completely blacked out? The truth is, they're not protecting victims. They're protecting predators. They're protecting powerful people who appear in these files. And the most disturbing part, Trump is in the middle of all this. There are newly released photos showing Trump with Epstein on various occasions. There's a giant commemorative check with Trump's signature being held by Epstein. Trump's own chief of staff, Susie Wiles, admitted to Vanity Fair magazine that Trump is in the files, but insisted he did nothing wrong. But let's talk about Trump's behavior yesterday in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, because this reveals a lot about where we are. The man gave a speech that lasted 90 minutes. 90 minutes. And what did he talk about? Well, supposedly it was going to be about the economy and cost of living. But what really happened was a series of completely disconnected ramblings. Trump talked about how healthy he is. He said he'll let us know when his health starts to decline. I quote, "When the time comes, I'll let you know." Actually, you'll probably find out just by watching. People, the man is 79 years old. He's been seen dozing off in meetings. He's appeared with huge bruises on his right hand that nobody can explain. Speculation about his cognitive condition has been growing because, frankly, his speeches are becoming increasingly incoherent. Look, I know it's difficult to talk about mental health and cognitive decline of public figures, but when you're the president of the United States, when you have access to nuclear codes, when decisions about war and peace depend on your mental capacity, this stops being a personal matter and becomes a matter of national security. And speaking of national security, do you know about the unauthorized military operations in Syria? Because this is happening and nobody is talking enough about it. The Trump administration carried out military attacks in Syria that were described as declarations of vengeance without any authorization from Congress. This is unconstitutional. The president can't just declare secret wars without legislative approval. But let's go back to yesterday's rally because what happened there is revealing. For the first time in years, a Trump rally was marked by weak attendance. MAGA merchandise vendors who follow Trump all over the country were shocked. One of them was quoted saying, "Normally, Trump rallies are like a football tailgate party. This is weird." He started packing up his stuff hours before the rally started because there simply weren't people buying. And why does this matter? Because it shows that even Trump's MAGA base is starting to question. A CNN poll showed that only 45% of Republicans approve of how Trump is handling the Epstein case. Less than half among Republicans. This is extraordinary. Trump used to have 85 to 95% approval among Republicans. Now he's losing even his own base. Let me talk about the absolute hypocrisy of what's happening here. Trump spent years, literally years, feeding conspiracy theories about Epstein. His MAGA base became obsessed with the idea that there was an Epstein client list being hidden by the elite. They demanded transparency. They demanded justice, and Trump promised to give them that. But now that he's in power, now that he controls the Department of Justice, total censorship. He signed a law promising transparency and then instructed his Department of Justice to hand over black pages. And when confronted about it, he literally runs away from the questions. Let's be extremely clear about what this means. They're protecting criminals. They're protecting sex traffickers. They're protecting people who abused underage girls. And why? Because these people are rich, they're powerful, they're connected, and they include, quite possibly, the president himself. And before anyone comes with the argument, but what about Bill Clinton? Yes, Clinton is also in those files. Clinton should also answer for his connections to Epstein. But here's the difference. Clinton isn't currently in power. Clinton doesn't control the Department of Justice. Clinton isn't actively obstructing a criminal investigation. Trump is, and he has a track record. In 2005, Trump was found civilly liable for sexual abuse in the E. Jean Carroll case. Dozens of women have accused Trump of sexual misconduct over the years. He was recorded boasting about grabbing women by the genitals, and now he's blocking information about his relationship with the biggest sex trafficker of the century. Survivors of Epstein's trafficking are desperate. They appeared before Congress weeks ago pleading for justice. They promised to return in January to demand again the complete release of the files. These people suffered unimaginable trauma. They were trafficked. They were abused. They were silenced for decades. And now, when there's finally a law that could bring truth and justice, the Trump administration is silencing them again. Now let's talk about consequences, because this is going to have consequences. Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer was direct. The Trump administration broke the law, period. They had 30 days to release all the files, not some. Failing to do so is illegal. Khanna and Massey, this unlikely bipartisan duo, are exploring impeachment, not just of Attorney General Pam Bondi, but also of Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. Do they have legal grounds? Absolutely. Obstructing justice is a federal crime. Being in contempt of a congressional order is a federal crime, and both were committed here. But here's what really worries me. This isn't just about Epstein. This is about a pattern of behavior from this administration. It's about unauthorized military operations. It's about attacking the press. It's about appointing completely unqualified people to critical positions. It's about turning the Department of Justice into a political arm of the White House. And meanwhile, the real economy is suffering. Trump gave a speech yesterday about how the economy is great under his administration. But the reality, people in Rocky Mount are struggling. An 18-year-old told a vendor he couldn't buy a $5 hat because he was really broke. Factory workers are doing 22-day straight shifts just to be able to do Christmas shopping. Polls show that only 36% of voters approve of how Trump is handling the economy, the lowest mark in 6 years. In North Carolina specifically, 60% of voters disapprove of how he's handling inflation. 52% disapprove of his tariff policies. And about those tariffs. Trump recently imposed tariffs on imported furniture, claiming it will help North Carolina's furniture industry. But the reality is that these tariffs simply make furniture more expensive for American consumers. There's no evidence that jobs are coming back. What there is evidence of is that people are paying more. So here we are, an administration that is actively obstructing justice in the biggest sex trafficking case in modern history. A president who is running away from legitimate questions from journalists. Bipartisan congressmen seriously talking about impeachment, survivors being silenced again, and an economy that's failing ordinary people while Trump insists everything is great. This isn't normal politics. This is a constitutional crisis. And if we as a society don't demand accountability now, we're setting a precedent that presidents are above the law, that powerful people can cover up sexual crimes. That truth doesn't matter anymore. So that's it, folks. The truth is being buried under mountains of black pages and empty excuses. But survivors continue fighting. Bipartisan congressmen continue demanding justice. And we, the people, have to keep pushing. If you believe justice matters, that truth matters, that abuse survivors deserve to be heard, leave your like on this video, subscribe to the channel, because we're going to continue covering this story until the whole truth comes out. And most importantly, leave your comment below. What do you think should happen to officials who obstruct justice? Do you think Trump should be held accountable? What consequences should exist for covering up crimes of this magnitude? I want to hear from you, because at the end of the day, this isn't about partisan politics. It's about what's right versus what's wrong. It's about justice versus impunity. And I choose justice. I hope you choose it too.